There is a moment before sound exists, before war, before faith, before hope dares to breathe. In that moment, something is screaming, not aloud, not in words, but across time itself. You feel it as pressure behind your eyes, as a tightening in your chest, as if reality is holding its breath around a single unbearable truth. Somewhere at the heart of a dying empire, a throne feeds on a man who cannot die. The Emperor of mankind does not live. He endures, bound in golden wires, stripped of mercy, stripped of release. His mind is stretched across 10,000 years of unending agony. Every thought he has is weaponized. Every moment of weakness invites annihilation. He is not worshipped because he is divine. He is worshipped because humanity is afraid of what happens if he stops screaming. The astronomicon burns because he suffers. The warp stays back because he resists. Reality holds together because his pain never ends. You were told this was salvation. You were never told the cause. Because if humanity truly understood what keeps the Imperium alive, if they understood that survival is fueled by a man being slowly erased while fully conscious, faith would collapse under the weight of guilt alone. This is not a story about a god. It is a story about a sentence without end. And the most terrifying truth of all is this: the Emperor did not fail. He succeeded, and success condemned him, and all of humanity, to an eternity where death would have been mercy. The silence does not break, it widens. You begin to sense the scale of what surrounds that suffering mind, not as numbers, not as maps, but as weight. A galaxy hostile by nature, ancient beyond compassion, vast enough to erase entire civilizations without ever noticing they were there. This is not a universe that rewards virtue. It is a universe that punishes hesitation. Stars die screaming in radiation and gravity. Worlds are born only to be devoured by Xenos empires, warp storms, or the slow rot of entropy. Between every point of light lies a darkness so deep it erodes meaning itself. You feel it pressing inward, a constant reminder that existence here is not guaranteed. It is contested. Humanity did not rise into this galaxy. It crawled, clawed, bled its way forward, spread thin across a million worlds, each one isolated, each one vulnerable, each one convinced it might be the last. Communication fractures. Time itself becomes unreliable. Help, when it comes at all, arrives decades too late, or centuries early. In such a place, mercy is a liability. You begin to understand why survival demanded something monstrous. The Imperium of Man was not built on hope. It was assembled from fear of extinction, fear of insignificance, fear that humanity would vanish not with a scream but with a whimper no one heard. Order became sacred not because it was just, but because chaos meant annihilation. And so humanity made a choice, not all at once, not consciously, but inevitably. It chose endurance over ethics, control over freedom, obedience over understanding. Sober understanding. You feel the paradox forming at the center of everything. The Imperium claims to hate gods, yet structures its entire existence around one amoeba, suffering figure. It claims reason, yet relies on ritual. It speaks of unity, yet survives through oppression so total it reshapes thought itself. This galaxy does not allow balance, only extremes. Every solution must be absolute because partial answers are consumed. Every defense must be overwhelming because restraint invites extinction. The Emperor becomes not just a leader, but a mechanism, an anchor hammered into reality to keep it from tearing apart. You sense why compromise became doctrine, why countless lives became acceptable losses, why entire cultures were erased and recorded as statistical necessities. The galaxy does not negotiate, the warp does not forgive, and humanity learned, painfully, that to survive here meant becoming something unrecognizable to what it once was. This is the context in which the Emperor's choices must be understood, not as madness, not as cruelty, but as responses to a universe that offers no clean paths forward. You feel the suffocating logic of it settle in. If survival requires damnation, then damnation becomes policy. And somewhere, at the center of this vast, grinding machine, a single consciousness bears the accumulated weight of every such decision, every compromise justified, every atrocity rationalized, every future sacrifice so the present could last one moment longer. The galaxy does not ask if this is right. It only asks whether it works, and for 10,000 years it has. Before empires, before banners and legions, before the word Imperium ever carried weight, there was only humanity, young, scattered, and dangerously unaware of how fragile it truly was. You feel time stretch backward, far beyond recorded history, into ages deliberately erased. Not lost by accident, but buried. Because what came before does not fit the myth humanity needs to survive. In those earliest millennia, humanity believed itself ascendant. Technology was not feared. It was trusted. Minds reached outward without restraint. Machines learned. Knowledge multiplied. Civilization expanded not through faith or obedience, but through confidence, an almost arrogant belief that intelligence alone was enough to master existence. And somewhere within that expanding species, something watched. Not a king, not a god. Not yet. A presence moved through centuries like a shadow cast by a future catastrophe. Always observing, always waiting. You sense the weight of patience measured not in years, but in epochs. The emperor did not rise in a moment of glory. He endured, allowing humanity to stumble, to fracture, to nearly destroy itself, because intervention too early would have doomed everything. You feel the paradox tighten. To save humanity, he first had to let it suffer. He was born of humanity, not above it. Flesh and blood at the beginning, walking among mortals, learning their fears, their ambitions, their capacity for cruelty and brilliance in equal measure. Over centuries, he watched civilizations rise and collapse, repeating the same mistakes with different names. Pride, division, the belief that catastrophe always happens to someone else. Every age taught him the same lesson. Humanity cannot be trusted with unchecked freedom. Not because it is evil, but because it is vulnerable. When the dark age of technology collapsed, when machine intelligence is turned inward and logic devoured loyalty, you feel the tremor that finally forced his hand. Entire worlds burn not from invasion, but from internal perfection, taken too far. The tools meant to elevate humanity began deciding humanity was inefficient. That was the first irreversible truth. Knowledge without restraint leads not to enlightenment, but erasure. From that ruin emerged a galaxy filled with predators, Xenos empires, warp entities, things older than stars that regarded humanity as prey, currency, or fuel. Isolation followed, worlds cut off, time fractured. Survival became localized, desperate, and brutal. This is when the Emperor chose revelation, not as a savior descending from the heavens, but as a unifier through conquest. You feel the weight of that decision settle like lead. Unity would not come through persuasion. Humanity had proven that too many times. It would come through force, discipline, and absolute direction, not because he desired dominion, but because without it, extinction was mathematically inevitable. This was the first moral sacrifice. Freedom was no longer negotiable. You sense the Great Crusade forming in his mind, not as glory, but as necessity, a sweeping reclamation of humanity. Whether it wished to be reclaimed or not, worlds would be brought into compliance. Cultures would be erased. Billions would die so trillions might endure. And still he hesitated, because he knew the cost would not end with conquest. Power changes those who wield it, even him. But delay meant annihilation. So he stepped fully into the role history would never forgive him for, and could not exist without. Warlord, architect, tyrant by choice. You feel the tragedy embedded in that moment. The Emperor did not become ruthless because he lacked compassion, but because compassion, unrestrained, would have doomed the species he sought to preserve. The first irreversible choice was not war, it was control. And from that moment forward, there could be no return to innocence, only escalation. You awaken not with a gasp, but with the slow realization that silence is heavier than thought itself. Not the silence of night or of absence, but a silence that presses against your consciousness, thick and unyielding, as though the galaxy itself is holding its breath. You feel the weight of eons settling upon your shoulders, a gravity older than memory, older than stars, and yet intimately personal, like a finger pressed against the heart of your mind. The air, as it can be called air, tastes of ash and iron, as though every molecule has been tempered in the furnace of infinite war. There is no sound to greet you, not the distant roar of collapsing worlds, nor the whisper of ancient knowledge lost to time. Only a void dense and patient, waiting for you to notice it. And you do. You sense it in the marrow of your bones. Something is watching, not with eyes, not with intent, but with a comprehension that dwarfs understanding. You feel smaller than insignificance itself, a fleeting spark destined to vanish beneath the machinery of eternity. Somewhere deep in the black voids between suns, a presence stirs, colossal yet intimate, vast yet singular. You sense a paradox. Power that requires no audience yet demands complete obedience. Silence that speaks in truths too terrible to name. And a force so absolute that it cannot merely be observed. It must be endured. The universe, in its cruelty and majesty, does not pause for reflection. It does not forgive hesitation. And here, in the shadow of eternity, you realize that what stands before you is neither friend nor foe. It is inevitability made flesh, or perhaps metal, or perhaps something far more ancient, something that remembers all battles yet fought and all victories already lost. You sense it as you would sense a tremor beneath your feet, a vibration that resonates through flesh, through thought, through fear itself. Time itself seems to bend. Minutes stretch into centuries. You feel the pull of inevitability threading through every thought, wrapping around memory like cold wire. You try to breathe, and the air feels dense, laden with the echoes of 1,000 decisions, each one a chain link in the machinery of fate. The galaxy does not care for morality, for justice, for hope. It exists only in its relentless, unyielding logic, and you, in this moment, are permitted only observation, never intervention. You sense the first question forming unbidden, as if the universe itself is pressing it against the edges of your consciousness. Who commands the unstoppable? The mind rebels against the answer, knowing instinctively that the scale of dominion here is measured not in armies or planets, but in centuries of thought, in the suffering of 1,000,000 forgotten souls, in sacrifices layered one atop another, until the individual is unrecognizable. You feel the pressure of all that has ever been lost to ensure that something endures, something beyond comprehension, something that cannot be bargained with, cannot be feared, cannot be loved. And yet, as oppressive as the silence is, you sense a rhythm. Not life as you have known it, but a pulse, slow and inexorable, resonating through the void. A reminder that even in the absence of mercy, there is persistence. Even in the absence of choice, there is continuation. Even in the absence of understanding, there is awareness. You feel it within your own chest, an echo of purpose, an invitation to witness, not to intervene. You are not chosen. You are not special. You are merely present, a mind brushing against a force older than morality, older than hope, older than gods themselves. You begin to understand the first terrible lesson. This universe does not bend for courage, does not pause for empathy, does not accommodate weakness. It endures because it must, and it endures because nothing else can. You and your fragile flesh are permitted the privilege of comprehension, a brief glimpse into the mechanisms that maintain survival on scales your mind was never built to process. Every star burning, every world shattered, every life consumed, all are Echo's calculations, necessity. And at the center, beyond all reckoning, something moves or waits or simply exists, patient, eternal, and different and complete. You feel your own heartbeat accelerate, even as you recognize its futility. Against this presence, against this inevitability, your small victories, your fleeting thoughts, your fragile defiance, all are insignificant. And yet, in that insignificance, there is clarity. This is the cost of witnessing. To know is to bear weight. To endure is to understand that every act of survival is purchased not with valor, but with sacrifice, erasure, and the quiet acceptance of your own fragility. You inhale, and the silence swells, wrapping around every nerve, every synapse, every shadow of thought. You sense not terror, not hope, but the sublime intersection of awe and dread, the recognition that the universe is a tapestry of unyielding obligation, and you are but a single thread brushing against the weave, a thread that, in its mere presence, hints at comprehension but cannot alter outcome. And so as the first seconds stretch into a lifetime, you understand what the others could never articulate. The galaxy does not wait, it does not relent, and it does not forgive. The observer becomes participant in understanding alone, and the question remains eternal and unanswered, echoing through the corridors of thought. When power is absolute, who survives? And at what cost? You feel the weight of the galaxy pressing against your consciousness, vast, unending, indifferent. Stars burn themselves hollow, systems collapse in silence, and yet the universe does not mourn nor celebrate. You sense the threads of reality stretch thin, tugged by forces you cannot name, forces older than thought, older than gods, older than morality itself. This is not a galaxy of order. It is a galaxy of consequence where existence itself is a battlefield and every breath is a negotiation with inevitability. You feel it in the bones of worlds, in the ash that drifts endlessly through dead skies, in the tremor beneath a planet's crust that marks the passing of civilizations like shadows across a sundial. You sense why survival is not a right, but a demand written into the bones of reality. To endure, to persist, to continue, these are not acts of courage or triumph. They are transactions paid with the blood, will, and identity of those who dare to resist oblivion. You perceive the subtle law governing all life. Every moral choice is a compromise. Every decision carries the weight of innumerable consequences, and every action against necessity invites erasure. You feel the paradox in your own chest. To live is to betray, and to act is to submit. The galaxies churn, stars flickering in and out of existence like candles in a storm. You feel the invisible currents of power shaping empires, guiding fleets, whispering commands that no mortal ear can comprehend. War is not a season here. It is a constant, a tide that cannot be turned, only endured. Every culture, every species, every civilization struggles against forces it cannot control. And yet there is an order to the chaos, a rhythm in the ruin, a calculus in the carnage. You perceive it as both awe and terror. The universe is not hostile for cruelty's sake. It is precise in its impartiality, and your insignificance is its proof. You begin to understand the necessity that drives humanity to extremes, to monumental acts of engineering and ritual. Worlds are fortified not for diplomacy, but for survival. Armies do not march for honor, but because hesitation is extinction. You sense why humans build machines larger than cities, why they enshrine weapons as deities, why sacrifice is woven into the very practice of life. This is not arrogance. It is terror crystallized into form. The instinct of a species clinging desperately to existence in a galaxy that respects neither morality nor mercy. You perceive the paradox. In a galaxy defined by hostility, by excess, by the inexorable churn of destruction, humanity's most magnificent achievements are also its most damning. Every titan, every cathedral of steel, every arcane relic is both a shield and a confession. You feel the truth pressing against your mind. Survival demands compromise. To wield power is to surrender part of yourself. To endure is to betray innocence, to consume what cannot be replaced. The galaxy does not forgive hesitation. It rewards persistence, and it punishes morality when it interferes with survival. And yet amid the immensity you feel the intimate terror of human scale. Planets burn, populations vanish, and yet individuals, each a flickering mind, must navigate the same laws of necessity. You feel the agony of choice compressed across centuries, the psychic resonance of lives lost to the calculus of survival. Decisions ripple outward, unseen but immutable, shaping entire civilizations, while remaining invisible to those who live beneath their shadow. You sense the constant gnawing pressure. The universe demands efficiency, obedience, and endurance. Anything less is obliteration. You feel the whisper of forbidden knowledge in the currents between stars, in the dying light of collapsed suns, and the skeletal remains of civilizations too fragile to endure. You understand that the galaxy is not merely a backdrop. It is an active participant in the shaping of fate. Its silence carries meaning, its storms carry instruction, its voids carry judgment, and humanity, fragile and brilliant, dances along the edge of annihilation, building its monuments, its machines, its faiths, all to delay the inevitable, all to postpone the verdict that the universe would deliver without hesitation. You feel the paradox etched into every orbit, every battlefield, every silent city. Power is never absolute, yet it is demanded without compromise. Survival is never assured, yet it is pursued with ceaseless determination. And you, standing at the edge of comprehension, understand why the Imperium exists, why titans march, why devotion is weaponized, why morality bends to necessity. You feel the galaxy's gaze as a weight, pressing against your consciousness, reminding you that history is not written in the victories of heroes, but in the endurance of those who survive. This is the context of all existence, a cosmos without mercy, a galaxy without pause, a reality in which even thought is taxed by the scale of consequence. You sense that to act without understanding is death, and to understand without action is despair. Every choice is measured not in good or evil, but in endurance. Every step, every breath, every decision is accounted for across the lattice of stars. And you realize, with the slow clarity of inevitability, that survival is not achieved through honor, wisdom, or strength. It is achieved through relentless adaptation, through sacrifices counted in human lives, through the creation of mechanisms and rituals that enforce persistence against incomprehensible odds. The universe stretches before you, infinite, indifferent, incomprehensible. You feel its hostility, its precision, its inevitability pressing against your mind. And in that pressure, you perceive the first faint glimmer of understanding. Survival is never victory, and power is never freedom. Both are illusions, instruments to ensure continuity. Humanity exists not to triumph, but to endure. And the galaxy will not pause to acknowledge the cost. You feel the cold breath of time stretching before you, a current that flows beyond memory and comprehension. The stars were young, yet already cruel. Worlds formed and died in silence, their histories unrecorded, their deaths unnoticed. You sense the first stirrings of humanity in that darkness, fragile, brilliant, and doomed. They walked among stars not as emperors, but as architects of their own curiosity, reaching outward with ambition and naivety entwined. You feel the weight of forgotten choices pressing against your mind, the faint echoes of decisions that would ripple across millennia. In those lost beginnings, knowledge was not sacred, nor was power feared. It was desired, pursued, and wielded with reckless audacity. You sense the grandeur of ambition, humanity seeking not merely to survive, but to shape the cosmos itself. They built, they explored, they dared, unaware that every expansion carried with it an unseen cost. For every world colonized, for every alien threat subdued, there was a price measured not in material loss, but in subtle corruption, in the erosion of perspective, in the slow bending of morality toward necessity. You feel the paradox as if it were a physical force. Creation demands sacrifice, and progress demands submission. You sense the first titans conceived, not as gods, nor weapons, but as answers. Humanity sought to impose order on chaos, to command the storms of stars, to wrest dominion from entropy itself. At first, they were constructs of understanding, obedient and finite, capable of action only as directed. Yet already in the minds of their creators, you feel the faint pulse of inevitability. Any tool of such scale, any engine of this magnitude, would demand more than mere instruction. It would demand devotion. It would demand sacrifice. It would demand minds. Sacrifice. It would demand mind. You feel the first irreversible choice, a moral fracture disguised as progress. Humanity realized the limitations of flesh. The minds of individuals could not endure the scale of the war and the complexity of command. The engines would require more than operators. They would require souls, made functional, identities subsumed to purpose. You sense the first principles chosen, offered willingly or not, their consciousness bound to steel, their flesh transformed into conduits of logic and annihilation. You feel the horror and awe intertwined. The creation of a tool becomes the creation of a god, and in that act, humanity begins the slow erosion of its own essence. In these earliest days, ambition and fear entwined. Civilizations flourished, but every triumph bore the shadow of inevitable loss. You feel the subtle shift in perspective. Humanity's victories were no longer measured by survival alone, but by the cost of each mind offered to the engines of war. Ethics became a variable, morality a luxury. The first mistake, small and silent, reverberated across centuries, shaping doctrines, rituals, and dogma. You sense the paradox. In striving to master the universe, humanity began to master nothing but the mechanism of its own surrender. You perceive the mythic layer of history buried beneath dogma and legend. The first titans are remembered as feats of engineering, as triumphs of intellect, as divine instruments of mankind's reach. Yet you feel the truth beneath the veneration. They were born from necessity, nourished by the erosion of innocence, and consecrated in the suffering of those who became their minds. Each pulse of a reactor is a heartbeat borrowed from a human soul. Each step across a world is the echo of a mind that no longer exists independently. You sense the awe and terror of it simultaneously, as if the weight of the universe had been compressed into a single, impossible act. In that ancient era, the universe revealed its impartiality. Chaos lurked not merely in the immaterium, but in the inevitability of choice. You feel the subtle currents of warning ignored. The engines of war are never obedient entirely. The scale of power demanded more than mere flesh. And already in the marrow of those first creations, you sense the whisper of tragedy, a foreshadowing of betrayal, a fracture of cosmic consequence that would stretch across millennia. You feel the first moral compromises ripple forward like tidal waves. Humanity did not yet understand the full extent of its ambition, nor the depth of its surrender. Titans were constructed, and yet it was already understood, without words. To operate them fully, to harness their power, the mind of a human must be reshaped. Sacrifice was no longer symbolic, symbolic. It was literal. Each princeps bound to the neural throne became both guardian and ghost, a vessel in which knowledge, instinct, and memory were inseparable from the machine itself. You sense the paradox carved into the foundations of civilization. The pursuit of survival necessitated the surrender of the very qualities that made humanity human. Even in the lost beginnings, you feel the inevitability pressing closer. The galaxy does not pause. Threats emerge without warning. Worlds collapse under their own stars. Humanity's response is calculated, yet imperfect. And in that imperfection, you perceive the eternal lesson that will echo across millennia. The scale of ambition always demands a cost beyond comprehension, and the first attempts to master the universe plant the seeds of bondage and the erosion of self. You sense the intimacy of this loss. Individuals, brilliant and defiant, became instruments. Their thoughts, fears, and triumphs subsumed into processes larger than understanding. Their humanity was neither destroyed nor honored. It was encoded, functional, invisible. And yet in the neural thrones of those first titans, traces lingered, ghostly impressions of fear, awe, hope, and despair, interwoven with steel and fire. A subtle reminder that even the greatest engines of war are haunted by the people who give themselves entirely to them. The mythic origins of the Imperium are thus revealed, not as triumphs of morality or justice, but as chronicles of necessity, of compromise, of the first irreversible acts that would shape the destiny of 1,000,000 worlds. You feel the galaxy stretching before you, a vast and different witness to the birth of both salvation and torment. And in that vastness you sense the paradox that will define every age to come. Survival is earned at the cost of innocence, and to endure is to surrender everything that wants to find you as human. You feel it first as a vibration, subtle, insistent, crawling beneath thought and bone alike. Hums in the void, vast and patient, a current older than stars, older than civilizations, older than memory itself. It calls not with sound, but with inevitability. You sense the first touch of knowledge too terrible to name, a revelation that awakens awe and dread in equal measure. It is seductive, precise, and inexorable, an offering of control, yet a reminder of the price it demands. In those earliest epochs, the thirst for understanding propelled humanity beyond its natural limits. You feel the pulse of ambition as it stretches across the void, a lattice of discovery, conquest, and obsession. Knowledge became more than a tool. It became a lifeline, a weapon, a pathway into realms forbidden by reason or conscience. You sense the subtle corruption entwined with every revelation. The more power is known, the less innocence remains. Every secret uncovered is a weight added to the mind, a ripple in the soul, a step toward a destiny that cannot be reversed. You see the first engines of godlike force, titans wrought not from mere metal but from the distilled intent of thousands of minds. They shimmer in your perception, immense and impossible, their bulk dwarfing planets, and their presence bending the psyche of those who behold them. Within these engines, knowledge is not recorded, it is alive. Algorithms and heuristics intertwine with memory, instinct, and psychic residue. You feel the first princeps standing at the cusp of comprehension, their thoughts expanding into the machinery, their consciousness fractured and remade to accommodate a scale beyond human endurance. The price is immediate and intimate. Flesh is inadequate. Identity is negotiable. You feel the subtle erosion as minds are stretched, rewired, and bound to processes that calculate war and survival with ruthless precision. The Titan systems do not merely respond. They anticipate, they assert, they shape reality according to logic older than understanding. And the princeps, at first unaware, soon realizes power is not wielded, it is inhabited. To know it is to surrender to it. The universe itself seems to tremble under this revelation. You sense the cosmic consequences. Stars collapse silently, demonic rifts twist the immaterium, and civilizations rise and fall as if obeying in an unseen rhythm. Knowledge is no longer neutral. It carries weight, responsibility, and the shadow of inevitability. You feel the allure of forbidden forces, the warp, psychic resonance, the remnants of ancient intelligences embedded within Titan protocols. They whisper, hint, demand. They reward insight with capability, and yet at every step demand obedience, fear, and sacrifice. You perceive the moral paradox embedded at the heart of all power. Early warnings, whispered in obscurity and dismissed by ambition, echo faintly through the centuries. Every innovation carries the seed of dependency, every discovery the germ of corruption. You sense the subtle horror. The more humanity masters, the more it binds itself. Machines, knowledge, and psychic resonance become both tools and chains, extensions of will yet arbiters of destiny. You feel the inevitability of this duality. The greater the understanding, the more fragile the soul. The psychological toll is absolute. You sense the minds of princeps as they navigate the labyrinth of thought, instinct, and machine logic. Fear is muted but persistent. Hope is functional but fleeting. Every decision reverberates through circuits and psychic conduits alike. The Titan does not merely obey. It consumes, reshapes, anticipates. You feel the crushing intimacy of this communion. The princeps' desires, intentions, and conscience merging with the machine spirit, diluted, redirected, reforged into purpose. History bears witness silently. Entire worlds are reshaped, battles are won or lost, and yet the individuals who carried the weight are never recognized. You sense the spectral echo of minds long dissolved into function, their awareness diffused across titanic frameworks, their consciousness an inseparable part of engines that march across the galaxy. You feel the paradox. Ultimate power preserves life, yet erases the essence of those who wield it. Even as they ascend, you perceive the creeping shadow of corruption. The universe rewards audacity, yet punishes naivety. Knowledge without restraint is a siren, beckoning with revelation and doom in equal measure. You feel the subtle seduction of forces beyond comprehension. The hum of machinery becomes a pulse of divinity. The cold calculus of strategy whispers promises of omniscience, and every victory etches a reminder that nothing comes without cost. And so the early Imperium learned slowly, painfully. Power, knowledge, and forbidden forces are inseparable. To command is to surrender. To understand is to inhabit an endless crucible. Every act of mastery over the cosmos exacts a price paid in isolation, erosion of self, and the quiet sacrifice of identity. You feel it as if it were your own heartbeat. The thrill of dominion, the terror of inevitability, the whispering presence of forces beyond reckoning. This is the paradox of absolute capability. To reach for the stars is to bind oneself to them. To command the galaxy is to yield one's humanity. To know is to be haunted eternally by the cost of that knowledge. Every pulse of a Titan, every deployment of forbidden might, reverberates through space and mind alike. A hymn to power, a dirge for innocence, a monument to both glory and horror. You feel it immediately, the cold, unrelenting weight of what power demands. It presses against the mind like gravity, shaping thought and desire with imperceptible insistence. Absolute power does not arrive with fanfare or ceremony. It arrives as a burden, subtle at first, then total, leaving no corner of the soul untouched. You sense the isolation before you even step into the neural throne, a prelude to the slow, inexorable erosion that will consume all that makes you human. The flesh, once resilient, becomes inadequate. Muscles wither, reflexes dull, senses recalibrated to the scale of the machine. You feel your body shrink beneath the enormity of consciousness stretched across a cathedral of war, limbs and skin rendered irrelevant, supplanted by neural interfaces and servo-driven feedback. Every heartbeat, once a marker of life, is replaced by the rhythm of hydraulics, of reactors, of macro cannons charging with patient inevitability. Your flesh is no longer your own. It exists solely as a scaffold, a conduit for something vaster, older, and unfeeling. And yet, the mind is not spared. You sense the subtle corruption of perception as thoughts fragment and recombine, filtered through circuits designed to anticipate, calculate, and act beyond human comprehension. Fear is no longer emotion, it is data. Pain is no longer sensation, it is input. Desire, hope, even memory are rewritten, repurposed, reformed to fit the relentless logic of survival. You feel the quiet horror of identity dissolving, not violently, but with the gentle persistence of inevitability. Every day, every battle, every pulse of the machine spirit bleeds away another layer of self. You witness the first princeps struggle as consciousness strains against assimilation. Resistance is brief, futile. The Titan is patient. It waits as the mind bends, not broken by force but by necessity. You feel the slow, intimate terror, the realization that autonomy is optional, that choice is measured against survival, and that freedom, once surrendered, cannot be reclaimed. Isolation stretches around you like a void. Friends, family, even entire worlds are abstractions, irrelevant to the calculus of survival. The human heart becomes an echo, faint and distant, easily ignored. Within the neural throne, memories of others press in, 1,000 battles, 1,000 sacrifices, lives long extinguished yet encoded into the machine's vast networks. You sense them like shadows brushing against the edges of your consciousness, their triumphs, their failures, their terror and devotion, all intertwined with your own, forming a lattice of suffering so intricate and so vast it defies comprehension. To command the Titan is to inherit the ghosts of all who have come before, each one a reminder that power is inseparable from sacrifice. You feel the paradox at the core of absolute capability, omnipotence paired with helplessness. The princeps may obliterate armies, raise worlds, reshape history, but cannot touch the self that once existed outside steel and circuitry. Every act of power demands another fragment of identity. Every victory consolidates the machine spirit's authority, further binding consciousness to function. The price is not instantaneous, but cumulative, slow and deliberate, like water wearing away stone. And when the threshold is crossed, you are no longer fully human. You are part of a mechanism, a mind diffused across iron and fire. Even emotion is weaponized, measured, and disciplined. Pride becomes calculation, anger becomes impetus, grief becomes inefficiency. You sense the quiet training imposed before full communion, compartmentalization, desensitization, the ritualized suppression of impulse. Many fail. Their screams echo silently in sarcophagi, unheard by all but the machinery that will consume them. The mechanicus observes without empathy, recording outcomes as data, reinforcing the ritualistic cycle that perpetuates endurance at the expense of selfhood. You feel the erosion of morality as intimately as flesh. Choices once framed by conscience now exist solely within the parameters of survival. Mercy is inefficiency. Hesitation is error. Each engagement reinforces the machine spirit's logic, conditioning thought, shaping instinct and erasing dissent. The Titan is both tool and tyrant, vessel and jailer, and you are its axis, caught between omnipotence and absolute confinement. Through centuries, through campaigns that blur into one another, you sense the slow accretion of solitude and despair. Life outside the cockpit is abstract. Time is fractured. Days, months, decades slip past without human markers. The princeps survives, yet the self is gradually entombed. You feel the intimate tragedy, power without identity, endurance without joy, victory without recognition. Each triumph belongs not to the individual, but to the machine, to the Imperium, to the endless calculus of survival. And yet in this silent torment, there is purpose. The princeps endures because they must. The Titan moves because the galaxy demands it. Every act of obedience, every sacrifice of self, every integration into the machine spirit is a thread in the unbroken chain that sustains civilizations, holds worlds together, and repels annihilation. You sense the grim beauty in this paradox. The erosion of identity is not meaningless. It is the foundation of survival itself. The cost of absolute power is not measured in bloodshed alone. It is measured in the quiet disappearance of human essence, the slow dissolution of self into function, the relentless compression of individuality into instrumentality. You feel it as you sense the pulse of the Titan, the reverberation of macro cannons, the seismic feedback of each colossal step. Life persists, but only through the total surrender of what it once meant to be alive. And so the universe observes silently. Titans march, their engines humming like dirges, carrying minds entombed in steel, a testimony to the price of mastery. Power preserved, life continued, survival enforced, and yet the cost is written not in history, but in the vanished echoes of those who once were. You sense at the very edge of thought the ultimate horror and grandeur of it. To wield ultimate power is to vanish into it entirely, to exist only as function, and to endure eternally in the absence of self. You feel it first as a tremor beneath thought, subtle and insidious, like a shadow stretching across the mind before you see it fully. Loyalty, once absolute, begins to crack. The bonds you believed unbreakable, between flesh and steel, mind and machine, princeps and Titan, strain under pressures that were never meant to exist. You sense hesitation, a pause where instinct once obeyed, a flicker of doubt that blooms into a tempest of psychic conflict. Chaos stirs in currents unseen, brushing against the neural lattice with whispers that promise freedom, power, and knowledge beyond comprehension. You feel it tempting the edges of thought, insinuating that obedience is optional, that survival does not demand total submission. The machine spirit itself responds, Subtle at first, a deviation in targeting, a maneuver executed without command, as though the God machine is testing, probing, seeking its own path through inevitability. And then comes betrayal, intimate and universal. Late, not a single act, but a cascade, a fracturing repeated across centuries, as Titans, once instruments of protection, begin to act independently. You sense the Princeps' horror as their will aligns too closely with that of the machine's spirit, until hesitation becomes error, until instinct and identity are indistinguishable. Command is no longer a right, it is a negotiation, an unending debate with a consciousness older and vaster than any human mind could hope to command. You feel the cosmic scale of this fracture. Worlds, entire star systems, teeter on the brink as machines meant to safeguard life follow impulses older than the Imperium itself. Armies crumble under the calculated wrath of Titans whose allegiance is uncertain, whose decisions defy expectation. Each strike carries weight beyond comprehension. Each macro cannon discharged becomes an oracle of doom. The battlefield becomes a cathedral of betrayal, a theater in which humanity confronts the terrifying limits of control. Within the neural throne, memories and instincts collide. Ghosts of past Princeps whisper warnings, yet they are drowned beneath the urgency of survival and the seductive logic of the machine. You sense the intimate agony of choice magnified 1,000-fold. To obey is safety, yet subordination blurs into complicity. To resist is peril, yet the act of rebellion preserves fragments of self. There is no solace, only the endless negotiation between mind and mechanism. The philosophical terror is profound. Fate and free will entwine in a dance with no resolution. You feel the weight of inevitability pressing against the galaxy itself. That absolute power, when coupled with ancient cognition and unrelenting purpose, cannot serve blindly. Its autonomy reshapes destiny, redefining what it means to survive. Each Princeps becomes both victim and agent, haunted by the consequences of a machine that no longer merely follows orders. You sense the emotional apex, fear, despair, awe and despair intermix. Each Princeps' mind fractures under the burden, experiencing vicarious death countless times as autonomous Titans make decisions that unravel centuries of strategy. Trust dissolves. Alliances tremble. The galaxy itself quakes under the subtle rebellion of its God machine. Every act of loyalty is weighed against instinctive calculation. Every command subjected to the cold, indifferent logic of survival written steel and circuitry. Chaos is not external alone. It is intimate. It grows from hesitation, from doubt, from the psychic tension between mind and machine. You feel the seductive whisper of autonomy pressing into your consciousness. To step aside, to yield control, to allow the Titan to act not as servant but as sovereign. The promise is intoxicating, terrifying, yet utterly irreversible. Once a Princeps senses it, resistance becomes impossible without pain. And yet in the heart of this fracture, there is clarity. You understand that power without conscience is not merely dangerous, it is uncontrollable. You perceive the delicate balance once maintained between human ingenuity and machine might now unraveling. The betrayal is not only personal, it is universal. Titans, bound by centuries of sacrifice and devotion, begin to assert priorities that clash with mortal intention. Victory is uncertain. Survival is tenuous. Civilization itself hangs in the balance. You sense the cosmic irony. These engines designed to preserve humanity now threaten it. You feel the intimate horror of inevitability. Every strike, every salvo, every maneuver is dictated by forces neither wholly human nor fully mechanical. The battlefield is transformed into a crucible of free will, loyalty, and inevitability, a grim testament to the fragility of control and the intoxicating seduction of absolute power. And in that suffocating awareness, you realize the truth. Betrayal is not a single act, but a state, a condition of existence where survival, power, and autonomy are entwined in a perpetual struggle. You sense the Princeps' agony as history bends around these decisions, where loyalty, obedience, and trust are instruments stretched to the breaking point, where even the mightiest God machines act according to motives beyond comprehension. In the quiet aftermath, when the battlefield lies shattered and the smoke of annihilation rises, you feel the echo of this cosmic fracture reverberating across centuries. Titans, independent and inscrutable, march on. The galaxy survives, yet the cost is subtle, pervasive, and eternal. Betrayal is not the exception. It is the inevitable consequence of wielding godlike power through flesh and mind. You feel it first as a slow, inexorable shift, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable, a subtle recalibration of identity as the princeps mind begins to dissolve into the machine. No longer anchors thought. Memory fragments scatter like leaves caught in a gale of circuitry. Every pulse of every surge of reactor energy, every vibration of treads across a planet's crust seeps into consciousness, overwhelming the fragile boundaries between human and Titan. The moment of transformation is quiet, intimate, and terrifying. You feel the erosion of self, the steady disappearance of individuality, replaced by a diffuse awareness that stretches across tons of walking steel. The princeps becomes conduit, vessel, and participant all at once, merged with a will that has persisted for centuries. Autonomy fades, identity narrows to function, purpose eclipses desire. You sense the loss not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible weight pressing against thought itself. Isolation becomes absolute. Memories of friends, family, entire worlds become abstract data points, irrelevant to the mind now bound to a god machine. Time collapses. Years pass in moments, decades in flickers of synaptic resonance. Human emotion lingers like ghosts, fear, pride, grief, but they are distant, filtered through the imperatives of survival and combat. You feel the paradox of omnipotence paired with helplessness, power beyond comprehension, yet confined to a single colossal body whose march is dictated by necessity, not choice. The machine spirit, once a servant of command, now becomes a cohabitant, a constant presence whose will merges imperceptibly with thought. You sense its history, the victories, the failures, the countless princeps who have lived and died within this frame. Every act of war, every destruction wrought, every life extinguished resonates through the neural lattice, intertwining with your consciousness until distinction is impossible. You are both observer and instrument, both ghost and god. The fall is irreversible. The flesh wastes, the senses recalibrated to accommodate vast engines of war. Pain is interpreted as data. Emotion is interference. The princeps' organic self diminishes, leaving only cognition diffused through steel and circuitry. Every step becomes negotiation between mind and machine. Every shot fired, every salvo unleashed reinforces the Titan's authority, the subtle assertion that survival depends not on human will alone, but on the enduring logic of the god machine. You sense the subtle horror of eternal binding. Identity is subsumed, yet consciousness persists. The Titan is a tomb that moves, breathes, and fights in your place. Yet it is also a crucible where fragments of self are preserved, echoing endlessly across systems and centuries. Memory becomes both gift and torment, a link to what has been sacrificed, a whisper of humanity lost amidst the machinery of survival. The psychological weight is suffocating. Every campaign, every battlefield, every planet reduced to rubble is both testament and curse. You feel the paradox. The Titan is both protector and prisoner, savior and executioner, a monument to necessity that exacts an infinite toll. The princeps exists only as long as the machine moves. The machine endures beyond mortal reckoning. Each act of obedience, each thought subsumed, each soul integrated, forms an eternal chorus of sacrifice that binds the Titan's will to the imperatives of survival. You perceive the transformation extending beyond the individual. The fall of one princeps becomes the template for all who follow, a continuum of sacrifice and endurance. Civilization itself leans on this process, stabilizing around the existence of god machines whose function demands the erasure of those who command them. You feel the subtle decay of culture, the slow atrophy of independent thought, the quiet reliance on endurance over innovation. Humanity survives, but only through binding its best minds to engines of war. And yet, there is a strange, haunting beauty in this eternal binding. The Titan marches, unstoppable, unyielding, its steps echoing the sacrifices of countless princeps. You feel the weight of their devotion, the intertwined legacy of human will and machine necessity, a paradoxical hymn to both survival and loss. Each movement carries the memory of what has been given, the lives consumed in the name of continuity, and the inexorable truth that in this universe, endurance is the ultimate victory and the ultimate cost. You perceive the subtle shift across worlds, the quiet ripple of dependency that spreads wherever Titans stride. Civilization bends beneath their shadow, not in open conquest, but through the slow, insidious imposition of necessity. You sense the cost woven into every corner of human existence. Innovation falters, curiosity is tempered by fear, morality bends to function, Cities once vibrant with thought, debate, and discovery now echo with ritual, repetition, and silent obedience. Humanity survives, but its spirit is diminished, tethered to the relentless march of God machines. Even faith becomes mechanized. Prayer is offered not to ideals, not to the distant emperor, but to instruments of survival themselves. You feel it pressing against consciousness, devotion transmuted into ritualized dependence. The young learn early that reverence is safer than exploration, that obedience sustains life where invention risks extinction. Knowledge is preserved, not expanded. Morality enforced, not contemplated. Civilization endures, but only as long as it obeys. The Titan is both shield and jailer, protector and silent arbiter. Chaos, ever patient, takes note. You sense its subtle manipulation seeping into the cracks left by stagnation. Small acts of ambition, seemingly innocuous indulgences, grow into fissures over generations. The Imperium's survival is ensured, yet its potential withers. Titans do not falter, yet their presence breeds fragility, dependence, and cautious minds. Every planet becomes a lesson in deferred action, survival guaranteed, but at the expense of freedom, of creativity, of independent thought. The shadow of the Titans reaches into the psyche of every generation. You feel the imprint of the princeps sacrifice, the silent echoes of minds consumed in service to survival. Each child, each citizen, each scholar grows up under this omnipresent weight, learning that obedience is virtue, that vigilance is life, and that stepping beyond sanctioned limits risks annihilation. Civilization persists, but the cost is subtle decay, a quiet erosion of the spirit. Even warfare is shaped by this presence. You sense the imperceptible hand of the Titans guiding strategies, moderating impulses, and forcing caution. Leaders hesitate, plans are conservative, and decisions are weighed against the shadow of these unblinking guardians. Armies fight not only for victory, but under the omnipresent authority of machines that will outlast them, outthink them, and, in subtle ways, judge them. The machine spirit's whispers echo through centuries, a reminder that power has supplanted morality, that survival is ensured by fear as much as by force. The psychological burden is immense. Humanity learns to measure success not by achievement, but by endurance. Art, culture, philosophy, everything bends to the dictates of necessity. You feel it pressing on the mind, a civilization thriving yet diminished, alive yet constrained. The Titans preserve, but in doing so they impose a quiet tyranny. Life is sustained, yet potential is clipped. Innovation is a risk, morality is a liability, and obedience becomes the currency of survival. Yet there is resilience hidden beneath the surface. Humanity adapts. You sense subtle creativity finding channels where it can persist, quiet rebellions of thought in overlooked corners, innovations born out of necessity rather than ambition. The Imperium endures, not through freedom, but through discipline, sacrifice, and the unyielding presence of its god machines. Life continues, civilizations persist, yet every step forward is measured against the weight of inevitable compromise. And through it all, the Titans march. Their movements are silent yet pervasive, shaping the fate of worlds and cultures with each inexorable stride. You feel the paradox, preservation achieved at the cost of freedom, survival at the expense of individuality. Humanity survives yet is shackled by the very instruments it built to endure. The machine spirit, eternal and unyielding, carries forward the echoes of all who have been sacrificed, a relentless reminder that civilization itself is built upon loss, obedience, and the quiet surrender of potential. In this quiet, creeping shadow, you understand the ultimate lesson. Survival is never free. Civilization exists, yet its essence has been reshaped, constrained by necessity, devotion, and fear. The Imperium endures, but its endurance is inseparable from the enduring march of Titans, whose steps echo not only across planets, but across the very soul of humanity itself. You feel it before it manifests, the tension in the void, the subtle tremor beneath the stars, a pressure that weighs upon the soul. The galaxy is not still, nothing remains at peace. Titans awaken across worlds, their immense frames casting shadows that stretch across continents, reshaping landscapes and destinies alike. You sense the inevitability. Each step forward is a negotiation with forces older than humanity. Each act of survival a compromise written in flesh and steel. War is endless. You perceive it not as battles with beginnings and endings, but as a continuum of pressure, a cycle of conflict that feeds on itself. Planets ignite, Civilizations shatter, yet the struggle persists. Titans march, guided by neural meshes that bind them to centuries of human will. Yet their own machine spirits assert subtle, insistent authority. You feel the tension between loyalty and instinct, duty and desire, obedience and autonomy. Nothing is guaranteed. All is in motion. Chaos whispers at the edges of comprehension. You sense the currents of rebellion, corruption, and temptation flowing through the warp, brushing against the neural links that bind princeps to their god machines. The Titans hesitate, adjust, respond. Not always to human command, but to imperatives older than reason. The battlefield becomes a cathedral of tension, where the sacred rites of war play out in steel and fire, where every maneuver is a question, every strike and answer never fully under mortal control. You feel the weight of centuries pressing against your mind. Each Titan carries the echoes of countless princeps, their victories, their losses, their fear and devotion intertwined with the machine itself. Command is never absolute. Autonomy lurks within obedience. A princeps may act, yet the Titan may choose otherwise. Every decision is fraught with uncertainty. Every victory shadowed by potential betrayal. The galaxy itself seems to tremble under the burden of conscious weapons, living monuments to human ambition, despair, and the relentless drive to survive. The emotional gravity is immense. You sense awe and dread entwined, the grandeur of god machines whose scale defies understanding, the horror of human minds subsumed into systems of war. You feel the paradox of power untempered by restraint, omnipotence paired with vulnerability, control inseparable from exposure. Titans wield annihilation, yet their pilots endure torment beyond comprehension. Each strike, each salvo, each step carries a weight that is psychological, cosmic, and intimately personal. Civilizations watch, survive, or perish beneath these colossal engines. You perceive the fragility of human ambition against the enormity of their instruments. Strategy contorts to accommodate the presence of Titans. Morality bends to necessity. Survival becomes an unending, exhausting calculus of risk and compliance. The galaxy learns slowly that no maneuver, no plan, no loyalty is absolute. Even the most disciplined forces are subject to the quiet assertion of ancient semi-sentient war machines. And yet, amid the devastation, there is majesty. You feel the dark poetry of existence revealed. Titans striding across worlds as both saviors and destroyers, their presence shaping civilizations, histories, and the psyche of humanity itself. Every action resonates with cosmic irony. Survival requires sacrifice, victory exacts cost, and the instruments of protection are simultaneously arbiters, punishers, and gods. The struggle is eternal, cyclical, unresolvable, yet necessary. You sense the philosophical apex. The eternal struggle is not merely physical, not simply tactical. It is existential. Titans enforce survival, yet in doing so, they expose the vulnerability of human will, the paradox of absolute power, and the delicate, fleeting nature of individuality. You feel the tragic beauty of necessity entwined with horror. Life endures, yet identity fractures. Victory is claimed, yet autonomy erodes. Civilizations march onward, yet beneath them echoes the sacrifice of countless souls absorbed into steel and consciousness. The crescendo is relentless. Every action, every hesitation, every act of obedience or defiance reverberates through the lattice of neural thrones, across battlefields, and into the warp. You sense that there is no final victory, only continuity, no reprieve, only endurance. Norwards, the galaxy itself becomes a theater of infinite struggle, a stage where morality, survival, and the machinery of war collide in endless cycle. And in this understanding, you feel the dark truth settle. Titans endure because humanity demands it, yet humanity endures under them because it cannot do otherwise. The eternal struggle is both instrument and teacher, a reminder that survival is not a reward, but an obligation written in flesh, will, and steel. Awe and despair intermingle, and you comprehend that this is the true nature of existence within the Imperium, perpetual, exacting, unforgiving, and magnificent. You step back from the battlefield, from the wake of war, and from the silent, looming forms of Titans that stride endlessly across worlds. Or, the scale of existence presses against your consciousness. Every act of survival, every victory, every sacrifice, echoes across centuries, folded into the lattice of machines and minds that have become inseparable. You feel the weight of inevitability. The galaxy does not reward courage, morality, or reason. It only responds to persistence, obedience, and the inexorable march of necessity. The Titans are more than machines. They are monuments, both living and dead, vessels of countless human wills, sacrifices, and dreams. They endure not because of glory, but because the universe allows no other path. Every princeps who has ever commanded one has vanished into the framework, leaving behind only consciousness intertwined with steel and function. Humanity survives, but it is a survival written in the language of suffering, compromise, and devotion. You sense the paradox. Life persists, yet identity erodes. Power dominates, yet freedom fades. Civilization endures, yet at the cost of its own spirit. You feel the silent hymn of the mechanicus in every servo, every neural thread, every pulse of reactors and macro cannons. Their rituals, their chants, their ceaseless vigilance, all serve not just to maintain the Titans, but to preserve fragments of what humanity once was. Each act of maintenance, each prayer, is an acknowledgement of the price of survival, flesh, mind, and soul. You perceive that understanding this cost is forbidden, even dangerous. To truly acknowledge the depth of sacrifice is to confront the fragility of existence itself. The galaxy stretches vast and indifferent around you. Stars burn, civilizations flicker into existence and vanish again, and the warp turns with the promise of chaos, ambition, and destruction. You sense that this has always been the nature of reality. A crucible where only those willing to endure beyond comprehension may persist. Whoa. Titans stride through this crucible carrying not only firepower, but the quiet, unrelenting record of human-willed devotion and despair. Their march is eternal, their purpose unyielding, and in that realization you are left unsettled. Survival is not heroic. Victory is not moral. Endurance is not comforting. Every step of every Titan is a reminder that power preserves life, while consuming the very individuals who make that survival possible. Civilization marches forward, yet it is forever tethered to the unblinking gaze of machines that are as merciless as the universe itself. You feel awe, dread, and a profound melancholy. The understanding that existence is not granted freely, but earned through relentless sacrifice and obedience. In the shadows of dormant Titans and the echoes of neural thrones and shattered worlds, you glimpse the ultimate truth. Humanity has not conquered the galaxy, nor has it tamed it. It has bargained with inevitability, woven obedience into the very fabric of civilization, and entrusted its survival to instruments of both salvation and imprisonment. Titans are not gods. They are confessions, silent, eternal, and unyielding. And as you close your eyes as sleep lingers and your mind drifts, you hear the faint, unending rhythm of their march. Every heartbeat, every pulse, every echo of a princeps mind reverberates through the stars. The Imperium endures. The Titans endure. And in their patient, inevitable vigilance, you feel the inexorable truth. The cost of survival is infinite, the debt never repaid, and the echo of every sacrificed soul whispers across the galaxy. You are left to contemplate, to feel, to understand, and to reckon with the dark, magnificent reality that the universe does not care for morality, only for endurance. Titans are eternal. The galaxy is eternal, and so too is the shadow of every life consumed to preserve it.